Hello and welcome to episode 289 of the THERSday Night Podcast. My name is Brady, joined by David on, look, it's been a week. Part you will know about, part you won't. Obviously, we've talked about David being a Pats fan. His Patriots have been, what's the right word for it? Debacled, embarrassed.
Oh yes, that was certainly a Super Bowl performance of all time. You
Um,
know,
so that happened this past weekend. What happened with me last weekend is I got sick. I am just now coming through it, as you probably can tell from my voice. So this is the most continuous speaking I'll have done, basically, since last week when I was recording a podcast. So this might be one of our shorter pods in recent memory. Also, just because the downturn has come again for the basketball programs, and kind of an emphatic suggestion that, in fact, no, it was not improved and it was not going to suddenly be this magical turnaround. As men's basketball goes 0-2 last week, including a loss to a 7-win NIU team on Saturday that makes it a 4-game losing streak to match what had been their 4-game winning streak before this little stretch of time. Not much better for the women. I didn't even mention I'm on my backtop laptop because I had to take my regular computer to the shop to get fixed. So a lot going on, kind of mirroring the trajectory of the basketball program. Troy 74, Georgia State 63 on Wednesday night. Honestly, in a vacuum, probably wouldn't be that disappointing or disastrous of an outcome. Yes, a little bit, and anytime you're at home, you want to win that game. But just that result, Troy is a good program. But you look at it, Jelani Hamilton, third straight bad night for him. He's got 8 points, 2 of 14 shooting, 1 of 4 from 3. It's the first time he'd been held under single digits in I think 8 games before that. So a real demonstration of the downturn. And it was tied at halftime and you lose by 11. So it's a situation where you really let the opportunity you had in front of you get away from you.
and they had a 6-point lead going into that last stretch before halftime too. So if you just talk about that minute and a half ish before halftime through the rest of the game, just no juice is the phrase that I kept thinking to myself as that entire second half was unfolding.
And even early on, the opposite of a basketball clinic early for both teams, 1 in 14 combined shots on their first 14 from the floor. And Troy started 1 of 12 from 3. And watching it live, I was thinking oh, they're getting lucky here. There's some good looks here that Troy has been missing. But the fact is they were still missing them. And so in spite of that really poor shooting start, it's a tie game at halftime. And it feels like, all right, if Troy just gets some kind of semblance of their offense going, and it had been a couple of games where they had struggled, so there's no guarantee that they weren't going to stay in their slump. But if it just gets a little bit better, they would have been in business in the second half. And they shoot 57%. They make 17 of 30. They go 5 of 12 from 3. A lot of which came right at the end of the game, as it was all right, they've got a lead, and then the Campbell brothers poured it on, and then they got as much as 16. An opportunity for a nice upset to kind of reset the vibes goes by the wayside. And then it goes into Saturday where it's totly different scenario. You lose 75-74 to a NIU team who had been struggling basically all season, in the 300s in whatever you use, net, KenPom, just not been a good basketball team. The win over Georgia State moved them into the top 300 in KenPom. They're at 299 right now. Improved them to 8-14. They're heading into this game just a hair under 32% on the season from 3. They shoot 48%. They make 11 of 23. 5 of 10 in the second half, and shoot as a team 46% in the second half to Georgia State's 39%. And it was a 35-25 lead for Georgia State. It felt like everything was right on pace. And then suddenly you look up right at the end of the half, NIU goes on a run and cuts it to a 37-35 halftime lead. which feels like a deficit given where you had been sitting, and then just couldn't get stops in the second half, and especially from three, and just let a team hang around, and a team that had won in your building a couple years before, as we talked about last episode. It's not like there's a bit of familiarity there for at least the head coach. I don't know how much continuity there was on the team, but it was really one you couldn't afford to lose, and just feels like emblematic of being right back where we started with this. I think the record is better. There have been good performances in there, but it frankly doesn't feel a whole lot different than where we were, say, the South Dakota State game or like the Kennesaw game, where it's like, all right, this is who this team is. They're incapable of getting taken out of the gear that they need to win a lot of these games in a row. And it's just kind of what we've seen from this program from the last 3.5 years, going on 4 years. And yeah, we're barely 6 minutes in, and I'm through most of what I have to say about these two games, and that's on purpose, not just because of the voice thing. It's honestly like there's certain parts of this we just know we're going to have to save for a podcast we're going to talk on not too distant future that everyone just kind of aware is coming, and it's like there's more things to say, big picture, but it's honestly, now's not the time. There will be a moment in the very near future where we can have all of that out and just kind of discuss all of how we've gotten here. But the fact of the matter is, the nuts and bolts were you needed a victory on Saturday against NIU to salvage some kind of vibes heading into the home stretch, and you didn't get it. You dropped your fourth straight, and now it just feels like the end game is kind of set in at this point.
Yeah, that's kind of unfortunate. One, after last weekend, you could squint, hop on a foot, and kind of see the big picture still. And, Troy's a good team. I'm not going to say that Troy, the result there is a surprise. But when you went on the road, lost to an objectively worse Louisiana team, we think, and then you lost to a probably better South Alabama team than you, then you come home, you lose to a better team in Troy, and then you also lose to a Northern Illinois team, and it's the same stuff that we have been talking about. All of the goodwill that came in from that Marshall to Arkansas State stretch, I'm not going to say it looks like smoke and mirrors, but this is probably an average team. And you and I talked about it after, I think it was the App State game, where what needs to happen for them just to get to 500 on the season. And that was a tall task. It was going to be, you have to dominate in Sun Belt play. And, through the first few games, little shaky, but they started to put some things together against some teams that, turned some heads in a way. Arkansas State has come back down to earth a little bit. Some of the teams that Georgia State has lost to recently are probably not better than them. So, I have to ask, and definitely rhetorical. Did they peak already? You want to be peaking in March, and here we are sitting on February 11th. And did they peak in January or something? That wouldn't be a surprise based on how these last few years have gone. So it's like, what is there even left to say?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of did last year. We hit this little stretch where it's like Cesar Edwards is all world. They're winning some games, scoring just a bunch of points, and then the magic ran out there a little bit. And it was a bit like, why didn't this happen in November, December time? Kind of like what we were talking about this year. So very similar vibes. And the other thing I'd say is similar. If you knew nothing about the teams Georgia State played, you look at this last stretch. They lost by 12. They lost by 10 at Louisiana. They lost by 2 South Alabama. They lost by 11 to Troy. And they lost by 1 to NIU. When you add in the context of who these teams are, there is no world where those 4 results in a row make any sense. A team that's losing by 10 to Louisiana should not have been playing South Alabama within 2 points just a couple days later. And a team that lost by 11 to Troy shouldn't have been losing by only 1 point less to Louisiana. And all of those teams should have been beating NIU at home. So it's like, they're just so much inconsistent, and there's so much that, even as we have talked about, like, these are some of the trends we like, and these certainly Jelani Hamilton really came on strong in that winning streak. The bottom line is, it's just not a group that does a lot of the same things good every night. And you talk about peaking at the right time. One of the ones that actually looks pretty great right now is you beat App State and Boone, who is rolling right now. Who is now 9-4 in the league, up into the 200s in Ken Pom and net. And the thing that I have thought, as I've regarded Dustin Kearns as one of the best coaches in this league, is he gets them playing well at the right time of year. And it's something Ron Hunter did with his teams at Georgia State as well. Like, there is a certain science to it that some coaches know how to do and know how to get the best out of their guys at the right moment. And it's just never been something that this team has done under Jonas Hayes, at least for enough games in a row. And so here we are, 9-15, back to 6-6 in league play after you were on your own in second place at 6-3. And just for good measure, you get swept in the MAC Sunbelt Challenge for the first time after being undefeated. I guess the one banner you could hang for the first 3 seasons under Jonas Hayes, you're 6-0 in that competition. Now you go 0-2 this year. Just an extra bummer there.
And I mean, not to get too far ahead, but we've talked about their road struggles. Their last 2 road games are coming up this week. It would be very possible for them to drop 6 straight games, and then do you really feel good about hosting Georgia Southern and then James Madison? Do you really feel good about your ability to, beat Coastal and Old Dominion to end the season? And I'm not saying that they're going to lose out all their games, no, but a lot of what caused them to be good during that stretch, yes, there was, we have to, I guess, acknowledge the fact that, some of it was smoke and mirrors. Like you said, this is going to be an inconsistent team. And with that inconsistency, we can't even guarantee that they're going to go 3-3 to end this stretch, to end the Sun Belt season at 500. We could probably, I think, mathematically they're eliminated from going above 500 on the year, or getting to 500. The best that they could do is 15-16.
Outside of a Pensacola run.
Correct.
But even in that case, it would be 4 losing seasons during the regular season, which is its own ignominious little, it would be, you can't have a winning season in the regular season no matter what. And if you make a run in Pensacola, then at that point you're still probably going to have to go all the way to kind of buy some more security, as it were. This week they're at James Madison Thursday at 7, at Old Dominion Saturday at 3:30, so Little Virginia swing. And on paper, as we're talking about, Georgia State is, heaven on earth falling down to 6-6. Both of them are 4-8 in league play. They both have losing records on the season so far. JMU's 12-13, ODU's 8-17. And you still can't look at this and feel like either are obvious, certain pickups. They've won, I think, a couple of times in Norfolk since ODU joined the league. Do not believe they've won at James Madison, though, in fairness. They had one of the best teams the league's seen a couple of years ago, so that's not so much about Georgia State as it is what JMU's been. But you think, best cases, you're hoping to get one here, but it's not like, even though you look at a couple of real eminently winnable games, and you think either of them are this great opportunity, just because you don't know where this team's at. Certainly the good mojo they were riding with a couple of weeks ago is gone, and so they're going to have to find some way to cobble that back. A couple of things you can look at, or just a note, that James Madison, their leading scorer, their real, far and away biggest contributor, one of their big guys, Justin McBride, missed a couple of games, but he was back last time, so I kind of expect he'll be available. They're not a team that forces a lot of turnovers. One of the lowest numbers in the country doesn't force a lot of turnovers. So that, in combination with the Georgia State offense that wants to take care of the ball and doesn't get the silly turnovers, that is a good matchup component for them. And then on Saturday, it could be a shootout if you bring your offense. ODU doesn't have great defense, but they're also looking to push the tempo a bit like State has from time to time. So if you can get some stops, I think they've got a better defense than Old Dominion, so that might be your opportunity. So if you're looking for an angle of attack for either of these games, that's kind of where my mind goes. But again, I just don't know who we're going to see make this trip. And it's, not like it's a disparate, like two different locations. It's like we're going to the Commonwealth. It's not going to be that bad of a trip. But how do they get off the bus at the arena? And like, how are they approaching it if one of the teams gets out to a 10-2 run or whatever it might be? And I have not said, and I do not believe it is a case of like the players have not been trying hard, but I can understand at this point, like the spirit breaking a little bit. And so that's where it is. It's not about like, I think the team is throwing the towel in, because I think to their credit, them not doing so when the season looked lost is why we had any kind of midseason recovery to begin with. Because I don't think it had been sudden massive change in the philosophy and the direction from the coaching staff. I think it was a player driven, like they started bringing it and just saying, we're not letting our season die like this. Doesn't last forever. You need a little bit of help on the player side. But at this point, after the 4 straight losses this late in the year, just curious how they approach the adversity that comes, and like what the message from the sideline is when those moments come, how much that's received and kind of jolts them into action versus feeling like the end is nigh a bit, and seeing how few games are left on the schedule and what the record is and all that.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this was a 2-10 team at one point, you know? So the fact that they were able to kind of claw back and, you know, kind of make things look at least a little bit respectable is commendable. You know, I don't think anybody's given up. It's a tough road trip insofar as you've won 3 road games. And James Madison they're definitely a lot better at home than they are on the road. You know, part of that could be opponent, part of that could just be guys are better at home. But I mean, this is a tall task, and it sucks because, like you said earlier, I don't think that either of these two teams are so much better than Georgia State that these are not winnable games. But they just went to Louisiana, a team that is definitively worse than Georgia State at the time. And they lost by 10. Didn't look great in that game, you know.
Lost by 10 should have been worse.
Way worse, you know. And it's just kind of emblematic of how they've looked on the road this year. I mean, it's just something happens to them when they get on the bus that they just do not decide to get off the bus and win a basketball game. You know, and it's frustrating because I still think, in a way, you know, I've heard a lot of you are what your record says you are lately for obvious reasons that we won't get to on the podcast. I don't believe that's true at all. You know, I think that there is a certain level of luck and just a certain level of sequencing that happens in sports that specifically does not include when you only look at record. I think on a true talent basis, this is a team that is better than 9-16. This is a team that's better than 6-6 in the Sun Belt to this point in the season. But we haven't seen it, you know, and that's where I will give the record people a little bit of credence because, you know, yeah, they might be a true talent team that, you know, maybe they are a 500 team in terms of true talent on overall record. We haven't seen it. You know what I mean? Like Eastern Michigan, that loss happened. South Dakota State, that loss happened in the way that it did. You know, I bet you if during that recent stretch in January, if that version of Georgia State started the season, we wouldn't be talking about the 105-58 loss to South Dakota State. It might have still lost, but it wouldn't have been by almost 50 points. You know what I mean? So it's frustrating because I do think that on a talent basis, this is a better team than this is. You know, and it's unfortunate that they are as inconsistent as they are. Because if they were more consistent, even good or bad, I feel like we could have a direction for this upcoming weekend. No, we can't.
Yeah, and I mean, this team had to be above reproach. Like, this team had to be above, your record should be better than it is. Like, in year 4, it needed to be, your record is good, even if it is, like, based on a bit of luck. Like, they needed to not be on the margins. And they're not even at the margins at this point. So it's disappointing. Not much better news on the women's basketball side. They only had 1 game last week, so less to say partly on that count. Less to say also because certainly I think it was on balance. Especially, I also say there's less to say because we've gone through it a fair bit when you just look at they lose 81-62 at ULM. They are beat on the boards 53-27. They give up a margin 46% field goal percentage to only shooting 33% on their own. And so in a game you lost by 19, just kind of like those numbers distill down, it's where basketball just becomes literally just a game of mathematics. It's like when the shooting percentage is that big, when the rebounding margin is that big, you're just not going to win that basketball game. And so they are left at 9-15, 4-8 in Sun Belt play. And for both the men and the women, they will finish the season, both of them, with 4 straight home games. And I think both teams have played themselves out of that mattering. Like, that could have been something you could use a little bit if you get a little momentum, or if you're in a good spot where you have a little bit of leeway. You go 3-1 down the stretch, maybe that gets you above 500, whatever the case may be for each of them. And frankly, now yes, they still got the season to play out. Yes, they're going to be in the tournament, so they want to get in the best position they can, because if you've got a chance, if you've got a game to play, you're still alive to cut down the nets. But they've played themselves out of it being where that can be a real advantage, because now it's, for the men, they're 500, but that a couple more losses could them bury a little bit further. At 4-8, you're talking about, you want to make sure that the season doesn't totally cave in, so you're not playing in the first round for the women. And on the balance of results at this point, it's kind of like maybe that's about where this team is, and it's a disappointment because after last year and the way it ended, and having Crystal Henderson, I think you were hoping this could be a step forward year to build on what happened at the end of last season, and just the pieces haven't come together with this group. And so it's another, it is what it is, and it's a disappointing deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's very frustrating too for the women, because ever since that 23-24, victory over James Madison on the road, it just feels like they have not been able to get out of quicksand. Even last year, yeah, there were some stretches, but they never won more than, 3 games in a row-ish. There's a couple of games there in the beginning of the season, but still, they were not against great teams that you can look at and say, okay, like, this is a team that might be really turning that next step. In the middle there, they've, had a really tough stretch against the top dogs, of the Sun Belt women's side. And, since then, going into this year as well, it's just felt like they've been in quicksand. I think it's hard for me to do the thing where I say that rebounds are a little bit overrated when you have a team that loses the rebound disparity this badly and the results look as they do. I do think, I think that people have this idea that just once you win the rebound battle, you'll automatically win the game, and like, sure, you obviously want more opportunities for you to have more possessions, but like, there is a way for you to take advantage of your possessions when you don't get rebounds. And the women's team, they're just not doing that. I mean, all season we've talked about finding a suitable, running mate for Crystal Henderson. And, in this game, I don't even think that, Cheyenne Holloman, she had a good game. I'm not going to say that she didn't. 17 points, 50% from the floor, 2 of 6 from 3. That's a good game, But then if you look at everybody else, it's like nobody else is allowing them to, be that third option. Be that, you're not getting a committee being able to put points in the board. And that has been the frustration with the women this year. So on top of the rebound disparity, which is just, sometimes that's effort, sometimes that's just a size advantage. That's just how that works, in the women's game. On top of that, you're not seeing the offense putting up the numbers that they were earlier in the year, at a consistent rate. I mean, in this current 4-game losing stretch for the women, they haven't eclipsed 70 points. Like that when they were winning earlier this year, that's what they were doing. They were always hitting the 70s. They have very few losses underneath 70 when they've scored under 70 points. So it's very frustrating that seems to be like the number for them,
Yeah, and I was talking about this with someone off air, that Ron Hunter is one of those people who said, like, rebounding is the most overrated stat in college basketball. But the thing is his team's one, the margin wasn't this big. They weren't getting beat, very rarely were they getting beat by like 20 plus. But his team's made up for it in other areas, like maximize things they did well. Shot near 40% from 3 as a team, and did other things. And that's what it's got to be. Is if you're going to have that be such a net negative, you've got to find other ways to make it up. And the way that this team has struggled, I believe, has just been not being able to maximize nearly enough of those opportunities, and what they're able to do well, and just showed enough of that on a consistent basis. And so they head into this week. They're at Marshall, at App State. It's an App State team that they beat by 22 in Atlanta not that long ago, but again, it's the season's getting short. Things have gotten against them. I guess I worry less about the mentality there because we've seen Gene Hill get his players up for a full season. Like, I really don't doubt that they're out there trying. And so it's certainly not the same conversation, I don't think. But Marshall, a team that they're going to play twice near the end of the season, is 20-6, 10-3 in league play. Like, it's a good team up in Huntington you're going to go face when you are maybe at rock bottom, or certainly rock bottom for your conference stretch. So concerning times for both basketball programs, and bad time for bad road trips coming up. Certainly, at least on the women's side. This is just not coming on the right time on the calendar for them.
I checked. I was curious. Third worst rebound margin in the country. 12. Average 12 a game. Rebound differential. That's horrible.
Yeah, you don't want to be anywhere near the bottom of the entire country in any stat, let alone one that like shows up right there smack dab in the middle of the box score.
Yeah.
All right, with the hoops out of the way, and you might notice a bit tick up in the audio quality from this point, fix some stuff on my end. We're going to get into baseball. We got a new sports to talk about. As we're talking about seasons collapsing, you've got a season that's 0-0 right now. The Bus Lot Boys in the final season, fingers crossed again, even though construction's finally happening, so feels like maybe less fingers crossed and just kind of waiting for that to keep getting built.
And they keep posting updates. Like, I've been seeing, like, it's not just construction's happening and, we don't really know what's going on. No, I'm pretty sure they posted, like, at least 2 or 3 times since they said, all right, we've got shovels in the ground.
There has been a lot of the equipment and, like, the asphalt looks wiped away in a large part of where they're building, so I don't know. I'm not a construction guy. Maybe we got to have Jordan back on to have this conversation, but it seems like progress is going aplenty to be done by, July of this year. So I don't know. August, they've got time because it's obviously not going to be till February of next season. They're going to need it to be available. But Georgia State baseball coming off a bit of a down year when maybe you're hoping to keep kind of the positive vibes going there under Coach Stromdahl. But picked 12th in the Sun Belt, just ahead of James Madison and ahead of ULM in the Sun Belt coaches poll that came out earlier this week. Maybe no surprise about anyone near the top of the list. Coastal Carolina receiving 12 of the first place votes, then Southern Miss behind them in second place with one of them. Troy in third place, Marshall in fourth, and then Louisiana in fifth with the lone other first place vote remaining. And no players selected to the All-Sun Belt preseason team for Georgia State. They've got 5 games that are going to happen between now and the next time we record. They're going to start at home this weekend, opening weekend, versus New Orleans, Friday at 4 p.m., Saturday at 3 p.m., Sunday at 1 p.m. Then they will hit the road for the first time and go to Jacksonville State next Tuesday and Mercer next Wednesday. Some familiar out-of-conference opponents for the baseball program. I think they played basically every season we've been doing this, both of those teams. It's funny that they played New Orleans to open the 2024 season. They lost 2 of 3 there against the Privateers, so hoping for a little bit of revenge there. UNO went 28-26 in the Southland last year, so Georgia State was 27-30, similar records. Opportunity, you hope for a home series win here to start the year. A little bit of intel, was able to glean from a little research, a little interview that Stromdahl did with the AJC, but curious your thoughts. I mean, I know you're also in baseball mode because pitchers and catchers and MLB reported. Cubbies, it's going to be the year. Braves, Cubbies, NLCS.
Finally.
I don't know where your head is at with the Panthers in baseball heading into the last year in the bus lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think last year a big reason why Georgia State took a step back was just the offense. They have been lovely named the Bus Lot Boys, but a lot of that is because like their power is not something that was a surprise with them. And last year they definitely took a step back in that department. They're gonna have to find a way to generate it again this year. I think a lot of who returns is not necessarily the biggest of names when it comes to that department. It's just guys have graduated. I don't say that as like, we've had a bunch of, transfers and stuff like that. Like, sure, that has happened. But it's going to be interesting to see how they're able to generate power this year because it's college baseball. This isn't going to be a team that's going to, have a pitching staff that's throwing lights out every single week. That's not the way that they're going to do it here. We would love it if that was the case, but it's just not how that's going to happen. So I'm interested to see where the power is going to come from this team. It's not a particularly young team, which I think is good. Like, yes, there obviously are still freshmen, but there's a lot of graduate transfers, a lot of seniors, a lot of juniors and up. So the experience should help Georgia State, insofar as the talent matches the experience there. But power is going to be the thing that I look for the most in this early stretch because that's the thing that has kind of sunk Georgia State the last couple of years. Even, in 2024 when they were hitting pretty well. Remember, there was that big funk at the end of, I think, March 2024. It just kind of flipped on a switch where they just stopped hitting home runs. And I think last year that happened a little bit closer to the start of the season. And they were just a little bit more inconsistent.
Yeah, kind of filling in a little bit there. If you had forgotten, Caleb Freeman gets drafted. He's in the White Sox organization, which is good for Georgia State just as a program. Got it. Another guy getting taken into the MLB draft was one of those big bats. A couple of the other ones, Michael McGinnis, Colin Heineck at UNC. So going to join one of the best programs in the sport right now. So it's a loss, and certainly you can understand why the Tar Heels wanted those guys. The quotes that jumped out to me, from the AGC article I mentioned Stan Autry did with Coach Stromdahl ahead of the season. I don't know if we're going to see the same type of the hammering it into the bus slot. The quote from Stromdahl is, in the past, we've done a good job hitting a lot of home runs and leading the league in a lot of offensive categories, but we haven't really gotten the results we wanted based on that model. So we're a little bit more small ball, a little bit faster, a better defense. We still have the experience, but it's not quite as much. And so you got guys like shortstop Carter Bailey back from last year's team, and Michael McGinnis' brother Will's. Couple of the guys that were hitting some home runs last year, but less behind them in the experience that we know about. Some transfers to know about. First baseman, DH type, Hunter Carlson, who was at Wichita State. Couple of guys from Wofford. Adam Haber, who went to Walton High School, so coming back closer to home. And catcher Lucas Grantham. Both those guys coming from the Terriers, and so that's kind of the core you probably expect to see in the middle of this lineup, and maybe a little bit of unfamiliar territory of not relying on the long ball so much, which, as you pointed out, I think was the fruit of a lot of success under Stromdahl in his time as the coach so far, but was also when that disappeared, they couldn't rely on it as much. If they couldn't rely on other ways to manufacture runs, then they were getting a lot of ones and twos in games, and the pitching was not going to stand up to that. So it's going to be certainly interesting to watch. You do have Cole Roberts back, your leading pitcher from last year. You got Tyson Benford back, who especially later on in the year started to kind of build on, and you're hoping him build up to be kind of a starter. He was kind of in between. He was more of a reliever most of the time last year, but another year kind of
was good.
Probably building towards that. I'm sure anyone knows their best chance to achieve the best success is to be a starting pitcher. So I'm sure that down the line he was hoping to build up to it, and so see more of that 2026. Guy they brought in the bullpen, Will Barkowski from Alabama State, who the article says is going to be the closer. So also they've had some success there bringing in guys, but it's been mixed. There's been guys they brought in to be kind of the closer types from other programs that have not ended up sticking in the role. So obviously, if they're moving a guy like Benford, who was pretty reliable in the bullpen last year, you hope that other guys like Barkowski can lock it down. But I'm still in a bit of wait and see mode. And obviously, we know you're looking up and down the schedule. It feels like a little bit the same strategy as the last couple of years, where you're hoping to bank some wins in non-conference because you know what a slog the Sun Belt is going to be. I mean, the teams I listed off, most of those teams at the top of the league are going to be in the conversation to make the college the playoffs. They're going to make I guess not Omaha,
football playoff.
The College World Series, the first, not necessarily all of like Omaha like Coastal did, but all Troy, Louisiana, Coastal Carolina, Southern Miss. Those are all quality programs that you're probably going to play year in year out. Certainly, if you want to make it far in the conference tournament, you're going to see at least one or two of those teams. And so feels like you're hoping for a series win here and another tester going on the road for the first time early in the year against teams like Jacksonville State and Mercer. That'll be a nice benchmark in handling your business on the road, getting used to that as a group as well, the chemistry building there. I feel like it took a while last season to get first road game, and it got moved because of the weather as well. So I feel like getting that a lot earlier this year is a plus.
I think they just played like Georgia schools on the road. Like, didn't they play at UGA and at Georgia Tech? Or
yeah, and there was a game. It was the Jack State game got moved, and they ended up having, I think it was like a MAC team come down and play a game like very suddenly at home. And so it meant that their first road game was even later than it was scheduled to be, which itself was not. I know they played a barrage of games at home to start the year, so they're avoiding that this year. They're getting a home series to start, which is a positive, but then they're also hitting the road fairly early, just trying to get that out of your system as well. So 5 games where playing baseball, we're going to learn about the Panthers.
Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I still think that this is a good coaching staff. It's unfortunate. Unfortunate might not be the right word, but I'll put it this way. There are Major League Baseball prospect sickos that talk about the schools that Georgia State play. Like, they know their names. And if you know anything about how...
I mean, not even sickos. Like,
exactly.
Pretty mainstream college baseball fans talk shop with Coastal Carolina and Southern Miss. Like, they know that they're legit.
Yeah, like that's always going to be a tough battle for Georgia State. We talk about it in the football season, how just the Sun Belt East is a slog. The Sun Belt baseball slate is just even worse, And that's not to say that Georgia State can never eclipse that mountain. Of course they can. These are just programs where, this is just what they've done for a long time. So it's just always going to be a challenge.
Coastal spends like a football program in baseball, and they get the results. They were just in the title game. Like, it doesn't get that. They're a blue blood in the Sun Belt. I mean, the Sun Belt in itself is kind of a high major baseball conference, and so you're up against that as you're still trying to build consistency and get winning seasons to stack on top of each other in facilities that, at least for one more year, are not up to snuff for what you're trying to do when you're trying to get guys to come and play here. So one last ride in the bus lot starting this weekend against New Orleans. And one last note from us as this abridged podcast. Didn't start the podcast with this time, but we did get one more bit of the news we were expecting on Ted Hurst. He got the Combine invite. And in fact is the only Sun Belt Conference player to get invited to the NFL Scouting Combine this year. So as we were talking about previous pod, not a surprise that he got invited when he was going to the Senior Bowl, and certainly when he had moments there that impressed scouts. And then I mentioned Dane Brugler as kind of like this guy is a serious draft mind. He put out his first big board after the Senior Bowl. Ted Hurst was number 62. He's on his top 100. He's in his top 70 for prospects. So speaks to the attention that Ted is getting and going to continue to get, and won't go through the whole thing I went through when I was talking about what the Combine was going to mean, because we did kind of go into it last time. But if you want to go back to that one last episode on our YouTube, on our Spotify, wherever you listen to the Thursday Night Podcast, kind of detailed the work that Ted can do at the Combine in a couple of months to really up his stock. And we already feel like he's probably going to be the best ever taken Georgia State player in the draft, but like to really elevate that number, he could do stuff at the Combine to really kind of solidify the real leap that he could do in the draft process.
Couple weeks, right? Isn't that later this month?
Oh yeah.
Did Vrabel
the draft's
lie to me?
The draft's in 2 months. I've been sick this week, as you'll recall.
No,
so,
it's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, in a couple of weeks, not a couple of months. The draft is a couple of months away. It all feels eternal, and so the dates kind of blur together. But yes, in fact, it's not that long from now. It would be pretty unnecessary to send invites out like it's not a wedding. You don't need to send invites out 2.5 months in advance.
You are cordially invited to work out in front of other people.
I probably could have worked that one in my head, but we are not our best and brightest this week, as I hope everyone will understand. But all that said, hope that this was an enlightening, as usual, tour through the Georgia State athletics. That look, this season there's basically no bright spots to point to, but hopefully, as you've been looking for any kind of solace, the Thursday Night Podcast has been that lone beacon of light way in the distance, the lighthouse guiding you to better horizons, and we'll try and do more of the same with better voice and better fettle, better technological setup all the way around. Thank you for listening. Thank you for fighting through with us on this episode of Thursday Night Podcast.